The Autounion racing car. Its first public appearance was just as sensational as a new trademark. 4 interlocking rings, symbolic of the Olympics, a programmatic expression of sporting ambitions. The Autounion was created in 1932 from the 4 marques native of German Saxony: Audi, DKW, Horsch and Wanderer. The headquarters of the new company were located in Chemnitz, but most of the cars with the 4 rings on the radiator grille were built in Zwickau. The racing department was established in the Horsch works, and its employees were ideally prepared for this new task, thanks to their experience in handling 8-cylinder engines and the high-quality standards required for this work. "20 mechanics were responsible for the engine, 6 for the gearboxes and axles, and 12 for the chassis. 20 metalsmiths alone were needed for the bodywork and other sheet metal work. This was not surprising, because the aluminium bodies of the silver arrows were all handmade. All parts, including cylinder liners, the engine block and the main engine bearings, were machined in the Horsch series production plant. In particular, the high-strength steel root superchargers required a great deal of intricate rework. The racing car was designed by Ferdinand Porsche. His concept called for a 4.4-litre engine, its displacement being distributed over a large number of small units to give a V-type 16-cylinder arrangement. The ignition mixture was injected into the engine through a supercharger. Each cylinder was to have 1 inlet valve and 1 outlet valve. All 32 valves were controlled by a central camshaft. In the first engine, a single-piece crankshaft was still used. However, the vibration and elasticity problems could not be solved with the required length and loading. A decision was therefore taken to gear the individual crankshaft segments and screw them together. Porsche had realized that the key problem with the new formula, 750 kilograms maximum permissible weight without tires, fuel and water, was not so much the increase in performance, but more the translation of these powerful forces into acceleration and speed while attaining good road holding. This prompted him to shift the center of gravity to the rear in his design and position the engine and gearbox behind the driver. The elasticity of the engine during a test conducted by test engineer Eberan Eberhorst on the test rig was astonishing from the very beginning. The maximum engine speed of 4,500 revs per minute was remarkably low for a racing car even at that time. It developed close to 300 horsepower and reached its maximum torque at just 2,700 revs per minute. In his contract with Autounion, Porsche had agreed to the acceptance condition that the car had to drive 10 laps of the Avus racing circuit and reach a speed of at least 250 kilometers per hour on each straight. The first test drives took place in autumn of that same year on the Nürburgring racing circuit, and on the 6th of March 1934, a mere 364 calendar days after work had started, Stuck drove the agreed 10 laps of the Avus circuit and set a world record of 217.110 kilometers in 1 hour. In order to set this record, he had to drive at a maximum speed of 270 kilometers per hour on the straights. In addition to Hans Stuck, the first Autounion racing team included August Momberger, Prince Leiningen, and as reserve driver Wilhelm Sebastian. The water pump broke down in Montlhéry. In the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring racing circuit, Hans Stuck at last took his chance brilliantly. With start number 1, his car was the first to cross the finishing line after 500 kilometers over the twisty and hilly circuit. A loud cheer went up when Stuck took the checkered flag as the race winner. The leading drivers, racing manager Walb and designer Porsche, had every reason to be proud of the first year of racing. Stuck won 3 Grand Prix and became German road racing champion and German hill climbing champion. In 1934, Bernd Rosemeyer had secured a place in the works team together with Paul Pietsch after test drives. He only drove the Autounion racing car for another 3 years. Rosemeyer made his debut at the Avus race in 1935. He chalked up his first victory at the end of the same season in Brunn. In the second season, the team comprised Rosemeyer and Stuck, as well as the newcomer Paul Pietsch and the experienced driver Achille Varzi. The cars were also improved constantly. For example, the A model, which still had a rigid rear axle and transversal leaf springs, became the B model, fitted with a new rear axle and torsion bar springs designed especially by Porsche. The C model, brought out in 1936, developed 520 horsepower from a 6-litre engine. (1936) was without doubt the most successful year for Autounion. The team-up between Autounion and Bernd Rosemeyer proved unbeatable. During the international Eifel race, the Nürburgring racing circuit showed the vagaries of the weather. Right from the start, the race developed into a head-to-head struggle between Bernd Rosemeyer and Tazio Nuvolari. The world-class Italian driver, driving an Alfa Romeo, had built up an 8-second lead by lap 5. However, Rosemeyer closed the gap steadily and was just a few meters behind Nuvolari at the pits on the 6th lap. Rosemeyer then took the lead on the back straight, much to the delight of the spectators. A few minutes later, thick fog blanketed most of the course and reduced visibility to little more than 50 meters. Bernd Rosemeyer was the only driver in the field who continued lapping at almost the same speed as before, when visibility was good. He finally won the race 2 minutes 13 seconds ahead of Nuvolari. Rosemeyer's victory meant a great deal. But Nuvolari was still regarded by insiders at the time as one of the best drivers ever. He was also considered to be one of the most sporting drivers because after young Rosemeyer gained victory, Nuvolari expressed genuine joy at his success. The female aviator Ellie Beinhorn, who was attached to Bernd Rosemeyer since their first encounter at the Brunn Grand Prix in 1935, and his companion at the races, looks back to that era.
Das war eine ganz besondere Freundschaft. Die beiden, der Nuvolari.
The friendship between the two men was very special. Nuvolari was, if you like, one of the fairest competitors. When he realized that the other driver was quicker, he signaled to let him past. And although both of them could only talk to each other in broken terms because of language difficulties, they were always very friendly to each other. The German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring in 1936. Motorsport had become a major attraction. Several 100,000 people flocked to the Nürburgring racing circuit whenever a race was held. The smell of car fuel and hot tyres, the sporting competitions and the sound of supercharged engines sent the spectators into raptures. Preparations for the race. The mechanics go about their work with their usual degree of diligence. In addition to the great public idols, the starting lineup include Achille Varzi and the newcomers Rudolf Hasser and Ernst von Delius. Final fingertip tests to see whether all 16 cylinders work. And they're off. And again, Bernd Rosemeyer shows his fans that he is in top form. On the third lap, he is timed at 9 minutes, 56 seconds. He's therefore the first driver to break the elusive 10-minute barrier for the Nürburgring North Loop. The race ended with a double triumph for Autounion when Rosemeyer took first place and Stuck was runner-up. 4 out of the first 6 cars across the finishing line were Silver Arrows built in Zwickau. It didn't take long to find out why Bernd Rosemeyer was in such a good mood. Only a few days before the race, he had married Ellie Beinhorn. This success was surpassed in the Swiss Grand Prix when Autounion drivers Bernd Rosemeyer, Achille Varzi and Hans Stuck filled the first 3 places. Only 5 cars finished the race and 4 of them were from the Autounion team. In addition to the above-mentioned drivers, the Autounion team included the following drivers in 36-37. Ernst von Delius, who was killed during the German Grand Prix in 1937. Rudolf Hasser, who, like Delius, had been successful in the past as a sports car driver. And Hermann Paul Müller, who, like Rosemeyer, had taken part in motorcycle races. The Autounion team even took part in 2 races in South Africa in 1937, with the understandable aim of promoting export interests. The event was organized as a handicap race. Delius and Rosemeyer had to start at the very back of the grid because the organizers assumed